proceed? State?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense?
Yes, sir.
All right, so let's bring the jury in.
Jurors entering.
Okay, are all jurors present or accounted for?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect the attendance of our defendant, Mr. Demons, State Counsel, the Assistant State Attorneys, ladies and gentlemen, the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I trust you all have a nice weekend. We're about ready to begin today. At this time, the attorneys for the parties have the opportunity to make what are called opening statements, in which they may explain to you the issues in the case and summarize the facts that they expect the evidence will show. The statements that the attorneys now make and the arguments that they later make are not to be considered by you as either evidence in the case or as your instructions on the law. Nevertheless, these statements are intended to help you properly understand the issues, the evidence, and the applicable law, so you should give them your close attention. Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
On October 26th of 2018, this defendant shot and killed two of his friends. He killed Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to set out the story and how this unfolded and lay out what I expect the evidence will show during the course of this trial. First thing you are going to hear is that at 4:35 a.m. on October 26th of 2018, Cortlen Henry, the co-defendant, shows up at Memorial Miramar Hospital. In his car, he has two dead bodies. In the front passenger seat is Anthony Williams. In the rear passenger seat is Christopher Thomas. They are dead, they are riddled with bullets, and the car is full of blood. Christopher Thomas is sitting in the rear. There is multiple defects to his body. Anthony Williams, who is sitting in the front, has two major injuries. Officer Jessica Amangor is working a detail at the hospital. Cortlen Henry runs in, starts telling a story about a drive-by. Quote unquote, drive-by. Cortlen Henry, and you're going to learn a lot about Miramar geography during the course of this trial, tells a story that he and his buddies, just the two that are in the car, were at a music studio here in downtown Fort Lauderdale at 805 Northeast 4th Avenue. He's going to tell law enforcement, and you're going to hear this statement, you're going to hear the actual audio of him telling law enforcement, we were at the recording studio, we drove home, because they lived out in West Miramar. You're going to hear Cortlen say that they come across in the path of travel, that they're getting off the highway on I-75 southbound to go west on Miramar Parkway. And you're going to hear that on Miramar Parkway, sometime between 160th, which is also commonly referred to as Dykes Road, and 172nd, Cortlen Henry says they were shot at. That he ducked down, and you'll see him doing that in the video, and that he didn't see any car, he didn't see any people, he has no information, and that he quickly went to the nearest hospital. So you're going to learn that when you go on Miramar Parkway and you take that right at 172, Memorial Miramar is just about 1 mile north. So the distance between most major intersections in Broward County is 1 mile. So you're going to learn that from 160th to 172nd, 1 mile. From 172nd to the next major intersection on Miramar Parkway, 184th, 1 mile. So you're going to hear and find that Mr. Henry's statement that the car is traveling westbound on Memorial Parkway, then goes north on 172nd and shows up at the hospital for the drive-by is completely and utterly false. How can I tell you that, ladies and gentlemen? Well, the detectives from Miramar at this point shut down the entire length of Miramar Parkway from 160th to 172nd. And they sit and they walk side by side for an hour, that mile-long stretch, looking for evidence of this drive-by. Because evidence is the remnants a crime leaves behind. And in this case, the lack of evidence is very important. There is a lack of any evidence whatsoever to support that a drive-by happened on Miramar Parkway. What would they look for? Shell casings, glass fragments, projectiles, tire marks. You're going to hear that there is none of that found whatsoever. So then they said, well, maybe we have the time frame wrong. Maybe we have the location wrong. So they walk an additional mile from 172 to 184th. Still nothing. No broken glass, no projectiles, no fire casings. Detectives know they have a Jeep that they are looking at the Memorial Miramar Hospital that has 16 easily identifiable bullet defects, that has a broken out rear view window and 2 broken side windows on the passenger side. Things aren't adding up. So detectives work backwards. They are then able to determine that 805 Northeast 4th address, that it's a recording studio, and that the recording studio is equipped with cameras. And ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see footage from both inside and outside of that recording studio. You're going to learn that on the morning of the 26th at approximately 1 p.m., detectives went out to the recording studio to try and see if somebody had followed the victims, to find out how they knew where they were going to be to set up this drive-by. In the video, that is the first time detectives learned that there was actually 4 people in that gray Jeep, and that the defendant, Jamell Demons, is in the rear driver's side seat. So let me set the scene for you at the recording studio, because there's actually 8 young men there. You're going to hear they arrived at the recording studio, not much was getting done. They were tired. They left at 3:19, and they got into 2 vehicles. So first vehicle is a red Mitsubishi SUV. In that red Mitsubishi SUV, 4 individuals get into it. Travion Glass, Dontavius Withers, Jacoby Mills, and Adrian Davis. They are in the red Mitsubishi. In the gray Jeep, you have the driver, Cortlen Henry, rear driver's side passenger, Jamell Demons, Anthony Williams in the front seat, and Cortlen Henry, again, the driver, Christopher Thomas in the rear. What you will find and what you will hear, ladies and gentlemen, is that this gray Jeep leaves the recording studio, goes over to I-95, takes I-95 south to 595, 595 across to I-75 south, I-75 south to Miramar Parkway. you're going to see traffic cameras from the Department of Transportation that show the cars going across 595, one after the other. In those videos, you're not going to see them stop. And it's just a small portion of which is covered by cameras on that. But then what you're going to see is the cell phone evidence. The digital leash. The item that is carried around in everyone's pocket, in everyone's car, you use on a daily basis. Because you're going to see, as Jamell Demons leaves that recording studio, he's got his phone in his hand, and he's playing on his phone. You're going to see on that phone information that Anthony Williams had his phone with him. And the interesting fact that's important to keep in mind is Anthony Williams, the deceased in the front passenger seat, and Jamell Demons, who is the shooter, in the rear driver's side passenger seat, have the exact same make and model of cell phone. Not only do they have the same make and model of cell phone, they are on the exact same cell phone plan. They're using the same service, the same cell towers, everything like that. So you can compare the information from those two cell phones and see how they track together. Christopher Thomas, who's the deceased in the rear passenger seat, he had an iPhone as well, and he was on the Sprint service at the time. In the other car, that red Mitsubishi, Dontavius Withers also had a Sprint service cell phone. So, ladies and gentlemen, you have individuals in two cars and all of the cell phone tracks together, going across 595, going until they get to Miramar Parkway and 184th. At 184th, the red Mitsubishi goes south, and you will then see it at 3:50 a.m. going through the guard gate at Sunset Lakes. That was the gated community in which the individuals were all living at the time of this homicide in October of 2018. On the Sunset Lakes guard video, the red Mitsubishi goes through, the gray Jeep doesn't. The gray Jeep instead goes north and then proceeds to go to the actual scene of the homicides. The gray Jeep goes north on 184th up to Pines Boulevard. From Pines Boulevard, it travels west all the way to the edge of the Everglades, where it is desolate, where it is dark, where there are no witnesses. The gray Jeep goes down south on US 27 and turns left on Pembroke Road. You're going to learn that Pembroke Road does not connect through. That right there, Pembroke Road dead ends at a trash facility. That at that recycling facility, you're not going to see people. You're not going to see activity. There's no street lights. And at 4:02 a.m., Jamell Demons exits that vehicle and stages that driveway. Because, ladies and gentlemen, remember, at this time, Miramar is going and working backwards. They're looking for communication to figure out how and why and how the location of this Jeep was known, why they would be targeted. At that point, there is no communication. You're not going to see any sort of phone calls, any sort of text messages going out, setting up any sort of meeting at the edge of the Everglades at 4 in the morning. What you are going to find is that after the surveillance footage is brought up, some of these other individuals say, oh no, we stopped. We stopped the car and Mr. Demons on the side of the highway got out of the gray Jeep and got into the red Mitsubishi. But ladies and gentlemen, it's important to know and look at the details, because the details don't match up. One person says, oh, it's at this location. One person says it's over here on the side of the road. Look at what the physical evidence shows, and that's what I would suggest to you as the most reliable things. So on the physical evidence, the Jeep is towed to the Miramar substation and a search warrant is executed on it. And at that point, officers, crime scene technicians, and investigators start going through the contents of the Jeep. And all of the ballistic from the drive-by are all coming from the passenger side in towards the driver's side. And then from the rear of the vehicle, forward towards the front. The medical examiner's office is also conducting an investigation. You're going to hear testimony about the autopsies that were conducted on Anthony Williams and Christopher Thomas. And this is when the suspicion, the investigation takes a turn. Because at that point, the fatal wounds for Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams are coming from inside the vehicle, from the rear driver's side passenger going out towards the passenger side. The other interesting thing the medical examiner's office is going to tell you is that when the drive-by was staged at 4:02 a.m., the victims were already dead. The medical examiner will be able to testify and tell you that the fatal shots to Anthony Williams, to his head, that enters in the back of his head and exits at the top, blowing out the front passenger window, was fatal. And that the additional wounds that are consistent with the trajectories going through the vehicle, he's already dead. They are post-mortem inflicted gunshot wounds. The same for Christopher Thomas. You will hear from the medical examiner's office that Dr. McDougall and Dr. Souter, who conducted the autopsies, that Christopher Thomas was shot in his left cheek. That was the fatal shot for him. You're also going to hear about stippling. Stippling is unburnt gunpowder that's ejected from the front of a firearm when a bullet is fired. The best way to describe that and make it easy to understand, if you have a handful of sand, soot, and a golf ball. You throw it, the golf ball is going to go the furthest because it has the most weight, the most mass. The sand weighs a little bit more than the soot, so it's going to go a little bit further, but not as far as the golf ball. The ash, the soot, which has almost no weight, no mass, therefore it can't have any energy put into it, falls very quickly. So that is the same principle that comes to gunshot residue and the powder tattooing that you're going to hear about, the stippling. The bullet travels the furthest. The gunshot residue, the powder tattooing, the stippling, creates a pattern. And from that pattern, the medical examiner's office can give an approximate distance. Why can they not give an exact one? Because their firearm in this case was never recovered. Law enforcement made diligent efforts to go and dive multiple canals, search multiple areas, apartments, storage units. They were never able to find the firearm. So without the actual firearm that was used in this case, you can't accurately and reliably recreate a distance determination. Common sense, ladies and gentlemen, the things that you learned in elementary school science about conducting science experiments, they apply just as much now as they did then. You have to minimize the number of variables. That's the only way to get an accurate experiment. So if you don't know the type of gun, you can't minimize the variables to get that distance determination. So what you're also going to hear is while law enforcement is going through that Jeep, they find one spent shell casing for a .40 caliber firearm. Why is that important? That shows a gun was fired inside of that car. You're going to hear that at once the location of US 27 and Pembroke Road was discovered, law enforcement goes out to that area as well. And there they locate an additional 8 shell casings, 40 caliber. But the interesting thing about that is that doesn't happen on October 26th of 2018. This happens on November 21st, almost a month later. Because that's when law enforcement gets the reliable cell phone tracking data that they use to determine that's the area that they need to be searching. Because at that location is where the cell phones of Christopher Thomas, Anthony Williams, and Jamell Demons all line up at 4:02 a.m. That point, afterwards, Mr. Demons' phone tracks with the 2 victims until about 4:20. So 15 minutes before Cortlen Henry takes the victims to the hospital. During those 30 minutes, you're going to hear as to where the path went. You're going to hear that law enforcement then searched that path again looking for trace evidence, such as firearms. They didn't find it. But you're also going to hear that Jamell Demons, on the side of the road, made a FaceTime video chat. At that point, he starts setting up the story. He FaceTimes his girlfriend at the time, Mariah Hamilton. Mariah Hamilton gets the phone call and screams, waking up her mother, Felicia Holmes. Felicia Holmes also sees the defendant, Jamell Demons, on that FaceTime video call. And you're going to learn, ladies and gentlemen, that that's a data event on a cell phone. That it's not a call for the purposes of the cell phone companies. It's using data, accessing the internet. Felicia Holmes and Mariah Hamilton see Jamell Demons outside, and he is saying he's just been involved in a drive-by, and he thinks Anthony Williams and Chris Thomas are dead. So what you're also going to find out is while Mr. Demons is out there on the side of the road, 4 in the morning, 4:42 specifically, he sends a drop pin, digital homing beacon, to his current location, to one of his friends, Frederick Gibbons. Frederick Gibbons is also involved in the music industry, and he asked to be picked up. Frederick Gibbons, then, about 11 minutes later, is sent another drop pin, where Mr. Demons has moved a couple of meters. What you're going to find out as well, though, is these digital leashes, they have more than just phone calls, accessing the internet. They have health data. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to find and hear and be able to see the videos at the recording studio and see Mr. Demons taking steps. Lo and behold, look at the health activity data, a pedometer, a step counter, that's what it is. 70 steps. Then you're going to see at 4:02 a.m. another 70 steps. Then at 4:42, the time frame in which he's sending that drop pin, to 4:53 a.m., you're going to see 1,397 steps. You will see this data showing the defendant had the phone and was using it. So, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that I have to prove is the defendant committed the crime. And to do that, the state intends to show the evidence that the phone was there at the murder scene, and there were no other phones there. There is no one else out there at 4 in the morning. So to do that, the state has to convince each and every one of you that this was the phone of the defendant. You'll see in the messages and the contents of those messages him identifying himself. This is Melly, giving out that phone number to multiple people as being his phone number. 772-713-9807. And to further prove that, the state is going to show you the Instagram, the Facebook, the Snapchat, Because contrary to popular belief, Snapchat doesn't disappear. And detectives were able to write a search warrant and get contents of Snapchat. And there are things that are there, and there are things that are not. And so, ladies and gentlemen, specifically, the Instagram, the defendant during the course of the months of October of 2018 through December of 2018 gives out his phone number 15 times. Says, this is me, and all during the same time frame of October 26th of 2018, he's giving out that phone number. So one of the other elements that you heard about initially was that this was committed by a criminal gang member in furtherance of a criminal gang. So what you will learn from the evidence, from the Instagram, from the private messages, was that Jamell Demons is a member of the G Shine Blood set. This is not a stage personality. This is not an actor that's playing a character. This was his real life. Ladies and gentlemen, you will see that as soon as October 24th, 2 days before the homicide, Jamell Demons is learning the oath of loyalty to the G Shine Blood set. You're going to see things in these messages that will be indicative of blood membership. For example, anytime a word would normally be spelled with a C, as in Charlie, they don't use that. They replace it with the letter B. So instead of saying, I'm at the crib, they say, I'm at the brib. Why, ladies and gentlemen? Because C is associated with cribs. B is for bloods. So if you look through all the messages, you will notice time and time again, Jamell Demons is dropping C's and using B's. And you're going to see pictures, you're going to see videos of the defendant doing something called stacking, which is a way to show a gang affiliation and to broadcast it to the world. And this is not just in music videos. This is not just in lyrics, because we're not going to get into that. That's artistic expression. That's not why we are here today. We are here because the defendant murdered 2 individuals. So in summary, the last thing I want to tell you that the evidence will show is that in the Instagram, because the defendant had a moderate social media following at the time of these events, people are reaching out to him. Some fans, some friends, some associates. You'll see on October 26th, after about 8 a.m. in the morning, Eastern time, multiple messages are coming in. Messages are coming in from individuals checking to see if he's okay, if he's been injured in this drive-by. If it's true that Anthony Williams, who's also sometimes referred to as Sack, and Chris Thomas, who is referred to as Juvy, are really dead. One individual, and specifically, sends out, and I want to quote the message exactly that you will hear, and says, right after this, yo homie, you good? Let me know something. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is where context matters. What does that mean? If you work at Google and you say, my whole floor is coding, that's a good thing. If you work at Broward General Hospital and you say, my whole floor is coding, that is a bad thing. The context around the messages matters. So in the context of this message, this individual is reaching out, asking if Mr. Demons is good, after he's been tagged in multiple social media posts about this drive-through, this shooting. And Mr. Demons responds very succinctly, I did that. Shh. Ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of the evidence, the state is confident that you will find the defendant guilty as charged of the first-degree murder of Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams. Thank you.
Counsel, thank you. Mr. Howard?
We have 5 minutes.
Need a recess?
5 minutes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short recess. Do not discuss the case, don't form any opinion about the case. Allow anyone to discuss the case in the presence. Certain no research, just leave those notebooks on the chairs. Thank you. Thank you. Let the record reflect the jury set down. Counsel remain all the defendant. And the assistant state attorney, Mr. Demons, you need a restroom break right now?
No, sir.
Nope. All right. We're in recess. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Prosecutors are given great power, endless resources to perform their mission of pursuing justice. But that's not what occurred here. What they will bring you is a case that is riddled with reasonable doubt, that is founded on an incompetent and incomplete investigation, and the exercise of poor judgment at every turn. The state cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt the allegations that they have made. And there is a reason for that. You recall Ms. Bradley, some of you may recall, during jury selection, going to great lengths to let you know that she does not have to prove motive. And she's right about that. The law doesn't require her to prove motive. But you know what does require motive? A young man to wake up one day and decide that he's going to kill two of his best friends. Best friends that he grew up with, best friends that he hangs out with, best friends who he lives with, best friends whose careers he was trying to launch alongside his own. They have no reason for why he would do this, because there is no reason. And if there's no reason, it doesn't make sense. And if after 4 years of investigation, the state comes and says, hey, he killed two of his friends, his best friends, and you're wondering why, and their answer is, oh, I don't know. That's the first indication that they're just guessing and don't know what they're talking about. And that, ladies and gentlemen, by itself is reasonable doubt. Why he would commit such a heinous crime against his own two best friends for no reason. What happened here is that the lead detective, Detective Moretti, saw a video of Mr. Demons getting into a car 40 plus minutes before bodies were found in that car. And then he discovered that Mr. Demons was a rising star. And from that point on, he decided he's the only person that could have committed this crime. Because if you're involved in prosecuting a star, you become a star. This was his big break. And he had tunnel vision, and he zeroed in on this person, this young man, as the only possible perpetrator of that crime, to the exclusion of all other leads and evidence. There's a difference between cases that are investigated and cases that are fabricated. When a case is investigated, the state uses all its resources, its investigators, its experts, and all its energy to identify leads and run them to ground. When a case is fabricated, first a target is chosen, and then the state uses all its resources, its investigators, its experts, and its energy to run that target into the ground. That's what occurred here, and there's a reason why I say that. There are a number of leads that you will discover that were identified by the officers but were either completely ignored or given short shrift. I'm going to let you know, run through a few of them by way of example. Start with the most obvious. Cortlen Henry. Now, Ms. Bradley started her opening statement by describing some of the lies that he told, as though to impute them to Mr. Demons. Those were not Mr. Demons' lies, those were his lies. Cortlen Henry shows up at Memorial Hospital, Miramar. You don't see him sitting there, but where you will see him sitting is in the driver's seat of a car with 2 dead bodies, a car riddled with bullets. And when he shows up with a change of clothing, change of shirt, gunpowder residue on his hands, evidencing that he had discharged a firearm. And he lies. He lies about where the incident occurred. He lies about how it occurred. And he lies about not having a phone. I think it was Miss Bradley herself who said, everybody has a phone in his pocket. Not Cortlen Henry. There were 3 phones in that car. There were 3 people in that car. So they take him at his word, despite suspicious circumstances, and they let him go on his way. They soon discover that he's lying about the location of this incident, and they went back to him, and they labeled him a victim. And they said, we know you're scared. Tell us what happened. He lies to them again. They let him go. And they know where he went. They know the location that he went. They know the house that he went to right after. And any investigator worth his salt would have thought to maybe execute a search warrant on that location to see if you find any bloody clothes, any DNA, any blood, a weapon maybe. You guys are probably familiar with the series First 48. That's founded on the proposition that if you botch an investigation within the first 48 hours, you've pretty much botched it for good. It's 48 months plus later. They still haven't served a search warrant on that location. Why? Moretti already had his man. What's the point of an investigation? To find out what happened. He's using all his resources to try and prove what he has already concluded did happen. So, after Cortlen Henry, lead number 2, a gentleman named Montrell Roll, and his sister, Nia Hewitt. Who were they? Well, another police department came into possession of jail calls between those two that occurred within 3 days after the murders, and discussed what they describe as intimate details of the murders. Intimate details means details that are not in the public domain. So 3 days after, these two people are discussing the details of a murder. They go out and interview Miss Hewitt. They don't interview Mr. Roll. And they ask her, well, how did you know all these intimate details? Oh, I heard it, something to the effect of I had word on the street. Doesn't say when she heard it. Doesn't say who she heard it from. Case closed. They move on. That's lead number 2. That was ignored. Then there's Robert Colbert. Who is he? He is a gentleman that owns a social media account by the name of Backwards. this social media account, almost immediately, within days after these murders, posts this message: LOL, we killed 2 of your niggas. Oh, really? Took him 7 months to go and talk to Mr. Colbert, the owner of this account, that posts what amounts to an unequivocal confession to involvement in that murder, in those murders. 7 months. Why? Moretti already had his guy. And when they go and talk to Mr. Colburn, what does he say? He said, oh, I created that account and I sold it for $20 to somebody else. Who'd you sell it to? Oh, I can't remember. Were you at the murder scene? No. Did you do it? No. Case closed. That's it. No more investigation. It would occur to a reasonable person, let alone a seasoned investigator acting in good faith. Why would somebody buy an Instagram account when you can create one for free on your own? If not to hide your identity. And if somebody goes to the trouble of buying an Instagram account to hide their identity and then confesses to a murder that you're investigating, maybe you ought to go and figure out who that person is and talk to them. And maybe there is no such person. Maybe it was not sold. Why would somebody create an Instagram account and sell it for $20? And if he's in the business of doing that, that's of interest. And how would anybody know to go to him to buy an Instagram account? These are all unanswered questions. No investigation. Case closed. Let's move on. David Hedgepath. Who is he, you might wonder? He had a Twitter account called Crucial Almighty. He posts a confession to this murder. Something to the effect of, we coming at that Jeep. Can't remember the quote. You're going to hear about it. And essentially it was a confession to involvement in the murders. It took them 1.5 years to go and talk to him. They knew about it 1.5 years earlier. It took them 1.5 years to go and talk to him. Why do you do that unless you've already concluded that you know who committed the crime, you've already determined who your defendant will be? And when they go to this young man and ask him, well, actually before, this is 1.5 years before, they said, oh, we've determined that he was just trying to start an internet beef to advance his career. Who told him that? Without talking to a soul. So it took him 1.5 years to go down there and track him down. And when they do go and track him down, they say, hey, did you commit the murder? No. Were you in the area? No. Where were you? Well, I could have been at work. At work where? Any one of 3 places. Okay, could you give me a work schedule? As though that would prove anything. He says, well, I can get it now. Oh, no, don't worry about it. Just email it to me. Really? And he doesn't even do that. There is no report that he even follows up and sends him an email of this mysterious work schedule proving that he wasn't at the location. They conclude, oh, he's not there, wasn't him, case closed. Is that how we do this now? That's not all. There are several other people who are potential suspects who were not tracked down. You are going to hear about them during the course of this trial. But beyond that, 3 years after arresting this young man and sticking him in a cell, the state looks at its case and says, oh man, this looks a little incompetent. Miramar police seems to have botched this investigation, and they call the Broward Sheriff's Office and ask them to come and look at the investigation upon which this entire prosecution rests. And he looks at it, and he says he instantly knew he had to start from scratch. I think his words were, it was the worst thing I had seen in my life. This is the Broward Sheriff's Office evaluating the work product of the Miramar Police Department. And we have problems with the Broward Sheriff's Office redo as well, but you're going to hear about that during the course of this trial. Ladies and gentlemen, the murder of anybody and the murder of these two young men was a tragedy. You're not here to solve a crime. That's their job, and they have watched it. Jurors often get confused as to their mission. You can't do a job unless you know what that job is. Every civil society needs to have a prosecutorial arm prosecuting crimes and offenses. That's a noble pursuit. There's nothing wrong with that. And every country does it. In some countries, the prosecutor decides who the person is, they send a cop to go arrest him, they throw him in jail, that's the end of it. We don't do that in this country. What we do is we ask, are you sure about what you're talking about? That's the purpose of this proceeding. You're not here to judge Mr. Demons. You're here to judge the sufficiency of the state's case. That is your assignment. You're not here for a show to see who you like more. There are two grades, beyond a reasonable doubt and not guilty. A+, everything else is an F. There's no A's, there's no A minuses.
Sustained.
You are akin to an FDA lab. Imagine a company saying, we're going to put on the market fat-free milk. And the lab, their mission is to determine whether or not there is fat in the milk. And what do they look for? They don't look for milk. They look for fat. The state is telling you they have a state that is free of reasonable doubt. You're not here looking for proof. You're here looking for doubt. And if you're off looking for the wrong thing, you're going to miss what you are here to look for. They have no motive. Their entire case is hinged upon the technology of a phone they claim to have been in Mr. Demons' possession. What they fail to tell you is that they have come across evidence that Mr. Demons got out of that car before this incident. They ignore that because it's not consistent with their faith. What they fail to tell you is that phone comes back to the name of somebody other than Jamell Demons. What they forgot to tell you is that their own witness will tell you that yes, that phone and Mr. Williams' phone and a number of other phones were all on the same account, and all of the people in the house used to use them interchangeably. But they're assigning it to him because that is consistent with their theories. They don't follow leads. They have no motive. Investigation was botched. The investigation, as a matter of fact, is still going on as we speak, up to a couple months ago. Yet they're here telling you they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And what you're still investigating for. The job of the state is to prove it beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And if you're a reasonable person and you have doubt, that's reasonable doubt. There's a song called Things That Make You Go, If you say that's reasonable doubt. You do not. Ms. Bradley is charming. She's good at her job in some respects. But this is not a popularity contest. We don't give, hey, good effort. We don't give participation awards. This man's life is hanging in the balance. And if there is a scintilla of reasonable doubt, you must have the courage to speak up and say so. You're not here to judge him. You're here to judge the sufficiency of their case. They have a big task in front of them. We should probably get to it.
Mr. Howard, thank you.